Morning, Glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt inside the ReliefFactor.com studio, inside of the Beltway, joined by the Federalist, Mollie Hemingway. Increasingly a must-read voice every day. Mollie, good morning. How is everyone on Team Hemingway?
We are doing very well. Hope you're doing the same.
Yes, indeed. Glad to have you. Mollie, you're not a media critic. You're right about everything, but I want to talk about the media with you today. And I want to start by paying Don Lemon. I think it's Sunday night. It was definitely not last night. I think it's Sunday night. But he's talking into the camera and he begins to address President Trump directly. Cut number 3, please.
Boy, oh boy. That's leadership. That's compassion. It's too bad that President Trump can't show either. By the way, what is it about President Obama that really gets under your skin? Is it because he's smarter than you? Better educated? Made it on his own? Didn't need daddy's help? His wife is more accomplished? Better looking? I don't know. What is it? What is it about him? That he's a black man that's accomplished, became president? That he punked you on the whole birth certificate thing? What is it about him? Just wondering.
His wife is more accomplished, better looking. What is this, Mollie?
I think it's probably a sign that you've lost some kind of control over your own reality when you think that Donald Trump doesn't like Barack Obama because Melania Trump isn't pretty. I mean, this is a supermodel. It's just a great example of derangement syndrome. And also, why is this even needing to be said on TV? Why is what Don Lemon thinks about the relative beauty of two women on a news program? And this is the type of behavior that is on these stations all the time and is treated as if it were normal. And it's not normal, it's not healthy, and it's ridiculous. It's embarrassing.
Mollie, in 30 years of broadcasting, I have never compared two women for their beauty. It's so unprofessional as to be breathtaking.
But Hugh, it's not just that. It's the idea that Melania Trump, an actual supermodel, is not pretty.
You know, I hadn't even thought about that because I'm so stunned by now. Does this objectively impact the credibility of all CNN?
It would if they had a ton of credibility right now. I mean, they're coming out of several years of perpetuating and perpetrating on the American people a hoax that Donald Trump was a traitor who colluded with Russia to steal the 2016 election. That was something that really destroyed their credibility. And they've never taken responsibility for their role, whether it was whether they knowingly allowed themselves to be manipulated by leakers, or whether they just weren't doing journalistic due diligence. I mean, a lot of us saw the same stuff they saw and knew we were seeing something troubling within the federal government as opposed to proof of a vast conspiracy with Russia.
Now, what's interesting, Mollie, about this is I know a lot of people at CNN. I have good friends there. I think Dana Bash is one of the greatest reporters ever. I have enormous respect for the intelligence of Jake Tapper. Mark Preston is a funny guy who I worked with. Zucker is a brilliant genius, and I work with them very closely on four debates. I spent hundreds of hours with these people. I didn't work for them. I worked with them when Salem partnered with them on presidential debate. I just don't know what's happened. It's like they're broken.
I actually feel that way a bit, too. I mean, I have probably less regard for some of these people than you do, and some of them really did play a role in the Russia hoax that is very, very disconcerting. But it does seem as if something is broken, or like they're being compelled in some way, which I don't think is true, but it just doesn't make sense that people who cared about journalistic integrity have kind of thrown themselves over into this fanaticism.
Well, the Olympics of TDS is underway there. And they want the gold medal. And I joked earlier to somebody that it's as though Jeff Zucker is handing out bounties for people who could attract the president's anger. The way that Greg Williams allegedly, when he was the defensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints, handed out bounties for his players who would take another opponent off the field. The NFL punished him quite severely for that, and he never admitted it. But it does look like a bounty system. If you can attract the president's attention and get him angry, you're going to go up in Jeff's esteem.
Well, in general, I think there is a truth to that there is this dysfunctional, codependent relationship between the president and the media, where they both benefit from each other's extremes. And that has been something we have seen going back to 2016. And there's a reason why Donald Trump points out all these media errors, and it's because it helps him quite a bit. The media believe it helps them to act cartoonish about Trump, who is a very different and president who a lot of people have problems with for reasons that are clear, but they forgot about what it did to their journalistic integrity, that they were unable to just cover him as they would cover any other politician without that emotional craziness that so many of them have.
It's unbalanced. I also know that it's distorting coverage of what is other than the virus, which is an all-consuming story. So there is one reason for people not to have covered the Flynn revelations, and it's because of the virus. But Mollie, the Flynn revelations is detailed by people like Eli Lake and Andy McCarthy, who are just absolutely professional on this, are stunning and disturbing, and mainstream media is ignoring their implications.
And they're ignoring because of their own role in doing this to Mike Flynn. I mean, the campaign against Mike Flynn, we have learned so much about it in the last couple of weeks. A lot of people recognize there was something fishy about it for a long time, but learning about the motivation for why the government went after him precisely to conceal what they were doing against Trump affiliates and how they went about that. That whole campaign was able to be done because of an uncritical media that just sort of accepted leaks from high-profile people and regurgitated them in the exact manner that the leakers wanted them to be spun. And this could not have been done as effectively without the media, and nobody wants to be held accountable for their role. It's a really shocking thing what we're learning about Flynn and how corrupt the efforts were to go after him.
Yeah, as Andy McCarthy says, we've known for a long time the what happened. We haven't known the why. And Andy suggests they took out Flynn because he could protect the president. And that's like 7 days in May stuff that I would never have believed. I just would never in my mind have imagined, because I'm a product of the Department of Justice. My first job after clerking is DOJ. It doesn't work it didn't work that way.
Yes, and the Department of Justice and FBI still have many people in them that are very good. What's sad about this case is it seems that none of the good people were involved on the cases that have received so much attention here against Mike Flynn and Carter Page and the Trump campaign and Trump affiliates in general. This is a scandal unlike anything I've seen in my lifetime. It's massive, and the evidence is all there. It is weird that you can't read about it at all in many publications, or you get the actual important thing buried in paragraph 17 of a very dry story years after we were told about this dramatic Russia collusion that's obviously not true. The media are just kind of downplaying it, killing it, suppressing it, and we have a much better understanding of what was going on now than we ever did before. We always knew they really didn't like Mike Flynn. I think a lot of people thought it was related to policy differences or whatnot. Seeing them kind of spell out that they were trying to avoid having to brief him on what they were doing against Trump campaign affiliates and him, what they had done against him, and that they therefore believed that a big part of their role was to get him fired. I mean, you see FBI agents talking about, like, maybe we were trying to get him fired. Maybe we should try and get him fired. You think, where in the world did they go wrong where they thought that was their job as bureaucrats or investigators to get the president's national security advisor fired?
I remember a book about James Garfield after he was shot, where doctors maneuvered to get other doctors out of his treatment because they proposed different treatments. They knew they were threats to their power and authority. And I think Andy McCarthy, I want to ask you this. Andy's theory is they took Flynn out because he was a professional. General Stan McChrystal sat in the studio and told me the greatest intelligence professional he's ever worked with. They knew that he would know what they were doing if given enough time and access to TCISC uh, information, that he would figure out what they had done. Do you credit that, Mollie?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're openly talking about it too in some of the texts and discussions that came out last week. They're debating how to handle the fact that they'd have to brief him. And the reason why that was a concern is he is a lifelong intelligence professional. He would know, he would ask questions that would make them, that they would be unable to answer. And I just want to remind people too, it also relates to why they got rid of Jeff Sessions. He did not have the acumen maybe that Mike Flynn had, but he's also a product of the Department of Justice, and he also would have been asking questions. It was absolutely key to them that they sideline Sessions and that they sideline Flynn, and they did it very effectively in both cases.
Okay, so my last question, in the gravity level of modern scandals, and by modernity I mean post-Civil War, I don't think we've ever seen anything like this. Now, it is not broad, it is not a deep state, it is a handful of people. But what they intended to do is genuinely the most shocking thing I think I have seen in a free country's history.
It's one of these things. I've been covering this story for years and was onto it quite early. And there was something about what happened last week where we could just kind of take a step back and look at a bigger picture. And that was exactly my thought, as well as my husband's. We're like, this is a staggering scandal. And even worse, again, is that the media that were involved in perpetuating it are not there to discuss how big of a scandal this is. And a lot of really good work has been done by very few journalists on this, and they are to be commended.
Take a look, Mollie, at the Pulitzer board. Take a look at it. I don't know if have you looked at the Pulitzer board recently?
Not recently.
It will never recognize this story. I didn't realize it until this morning when I looked at it, because Michael Shear was a guest of mine. He's won a Pulitzer. I said, well, I wonder who's giving out the Pulitzers. It is the most left-wing organization with any kind of bipartisan support, and it shouldn't have it. It doesn't have a right to it. It's a self-perpetuating left-wing machine.
Hugh, that's what kind of bothered me about yesterday. People were saying, well, these awards that they handed out yesterday are not for necessarily good journalism. You know, some of them were quite bad, in fact, particularly the 1619 Project, which is just riddled with errors and had to be corrected and whatnot. But I thought, why do people think that the Pulitzers would do anything but stuff like this? The moment that project was published, we knew it would get a Pulitzer. It was just in the recent years that they handed out awards for the people who wrote the Russia hoax stories. There's no need for people to believe that these Pulitzers commend good work, although occasionally they do, which is it's just a pleasant surprise. They exist to enforce and reinforce narratives that are false, and
and to censor those which are
important.
Yeah, they exist to also censor those narratives which are important and true, but which run counter to the dominant narrative. What I call, with a capital T and a capital N, the narrative. Mollie Hemingway, always a pleasure. Watch her on Fox News as part of the All-Stars. Follow her at the Federalist. Follow her on Twitter at Mollie. You'll find her. Thank you, Mollie.